I threw myself in front of the black convoy doing 50 down Route 60 because the men chanting in those woods had already drawn my blood, and I was gambling my life that whoever commanded 3 government sleek SUVs had enough power to make them stop. The lead vehicle stopped 8 inches from my knees. I didn't have time to feel relief. Behind me, branches cracking, voices rising in that language I'd recorded for 8 months without understanding. The cult from the stone circle. They'd found me in the woods. They'd chased me for nearly a mile through January darkness. And now they were 30 seconds from finishing what they'd started. The middle SUV's door opened.
Get in.
The voice was soft, patient, like he had all the time in the world while I had none. I didn't look at the face attached to it. I dove into leather that smelled like old money and something else, something cold, something that made my reporter's instincts scream even as my survival instincts shut them down. The door closed before I'd fully caught my breath. The convoy moved before the robed figures reached the road. Through the tinted rear window, I watched them emerge from the tree line. 6, maybe 7 of them. They didn't chase us. They didn't even try. They bowed. If you've ever trusted the wrong door because the room you were in was on fire, stay. This one's going to hurt. But you won't be alone in it. You're bleeding. The voice came from the shadows beside me.
Male.
Controlled. With a stillness that suggested he'd never needed to rush for anything in his entire existence. I finally looked at him. He was younger than I expected, or older. I couldn't tell. Dark hair swept back from a face that didn't belong on a rural Kentucky highway. It belonged in a Renaissance painting. In a cathedral. In the kind of dream you wake from crying without knowing why. His suit was pale gray, impossibly clean against the January night, and he wore it like kings wear crowns, not as decoration, but as divine right. Everything about him said wealth. But the way he watched me, utterly still, barely breathing if he was breathing at all, said something much older than money. Those men. My voice came out steadier than I felt. They were trying to kill me.
No.
He didn't move, didn't gesture. Just that single word delivered with absolute certainty. They were trying to take you somewhere. There's a difference. You seem very sure about that. I am. The convoy turned onto Ironworks Pike, heading away from Lexington, away from my apartment, away from everything I knew. Thank you, I said, because 15 years of journalism had taught me that courtesy bought time. For stopping. I didn't stop for you. His head tilted slightly, studying me the way I'd studied evidence boards, looking for the pattern, the connection, the thing that would make everything else make sense. I stopped because you were standing in my road. Your road? Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like recognition. Who are you running from, Lois? My blood went cold. How do you know my name? I know many things. He leaned forward slightly, and the convoy's interior lights caught his eyes, dark brown, almost black, with something moving behind them that wasn't reflection. I know you've spent 8 months investigating the families who gather in those woods. I know you found their meeting place tonight. And I know, his voice dropped lower, softer, almost tender, that you have no idea what you've actually uncovered. I should have been terrified. I should have demanded he stop the car. I should have thrown myself out onto the highway and taken my chances with the pavement. Instead, I asked, "Who are you?" His mouth curved.
Just barely.
Not a smile, more like acknowledgement of a move in a game I didn't know we were playing. Male Ashford. And you, Lois Daly, have just become very important to very dangerous people.
He paused.
Fortunately for you, I'm more dangerous than all of them combined. I'd spent 7 years married to a man who lied as easily as breathing. I'd rebuilt my entire life on the ability to recognize manipulation, to see through charm, to never let anyone make me feel safe enough to stop watching. But when Mail looked at me, when those ancient eyes met mine with something that felt terrifyingly like understanding, I felt my walls begin to crack. I told myself it was exhaustion. I told myself it was trauma. I told myself anything except the truth, that something in him recognized something in me, and whatever it was had been waiting my entire life to be seen. The convoy drove deeper into the Kentucky darkness, and I let it take me. Kentucky holds old things in its soil. The people here know it, the ones whose families have been here long enough. They don't build houses over certain plots. They don't dig wells in certain hollows. And they never, ever drive certain roads after dark during the third week of January. I wish someone had told me that before I went looking for monsters. I wish someone had told me that sometimes the monster finds you first and wears the face of everything you've ever wanted. Mail's estate appeared through the fog like something that had always been there, waiting. 200 acres of rolling Kentucky hills, he told me, old tobacco money from generations back. But the house itself, stone walls that seemed to grow from the earth rather than rest upon it, windows that reflected nothing, architecture that felt older than anything tobacco money could buy, that told a different story. I didn't ask which story was true. By then, I was too tired to care. The first 3 days I slept, not the restless half-sleep of the hunted, but something deeper, dreamless, heavy, the kind of sleep that feels like drowning in velvet. I'd wake to find meals outside my door, still warm, though I never heard footsteps. I'd wake to find my wounds cleaned and rebandaged, though I never felt hands. I'd wake to find fresh clothes laid across the chair by the window, my size, my taste, as if someone had studied me without my knowing. Someone had. On the 4th day, I finally left the bedroom, found my way down a staircase that curved like a spine, through hallways lined with paintings I didn't recognize but somehow knew were old. Not reproduction old. Not antique dealer old. Old in the way that mountains are old. Old in the way that hunger is old. Mail was waiting in the library. You're recovering. Not a question. He sat in a leather chair by the fire, a book open in his lap, though I'd never seen him turn a page. Good. I was beginning to think I'd saved a ghost. You didn't save me. The words came out sharper than I intended. Old habit. Old armor. You intercepted me. There's a difference. His mouth curved. That almost smile I was beginning to recognize. You're a journalist. Is that a problem? It's an observation. He closed the book, set it aside. You've spent 15 years asking questions other people are afraid to answer. You've built a career on seeing what's hidden. And now you're standing in my home, looking for the thing I'm not telling you. My heart hammered. Are you not telling me something? Everyone is not telling you something, Lois. That's the nature of truth. It hides. The question is whether what I'm hiding will hurt you.
He paused.
Or whether what you're hiding will hurt you first. I should have left then. Should have thanked him for the hospitality, called a cab, gone back to my apartment and my half-finished investigation and my life that made sense. Instead, I sat down across from him. The cult, I said. The week of the serpent. You know what they are. Yes. You know why they wanted me. Yes. Will you tell me? He studied me for a long moment. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed hours that didn't match any time zone I knew. Not yet, he said finally. But I won't lie to you either. Ask me anything else, and I'll answer.
So I did.
I asked about the estate, and he told me about the family that built it. Old names, old blood, old debts paid in ways I didn't want to understand. I asked about his work, and he spoke of investments, of influence, of the particular kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself, because everyone already knows it's there. Asked about journalism, and that's when something shifted. He knew things he shouldn't have known. Not about me, about the industry. About the way stories get buried. About the loneliness of being the only person in a room who can see the shape of what's being hidden, and the particular exhaustion of knowing that even when you expose it, half the world will choose not to believe you. You spend your life trying to make people see, he said quietly, and most of them would rather stay blind. It's not ignorance. It's choice. They choose comfort over truth every time. My throat tightened. How do you know that? Because I've watched it happen for longer than you can imagine. His eyes met mine, and something in them looked ancient, tired, almost sad. And because I recognized the look on your face, the one that says you've stopped expecting anyone to understand. I didn't cry. I don't cry in front of strangers. But something cracked anyway. The days that followed blurred together. I told myself I was staying to investigate, to learn what he knew about the cult, to find the missing pieces of a story I'd been chasing for 8 months. But that wasn't why I stayed. I stayed because he listened, because he asked questions and actually heard the answers. Because when I talked about my ex-husband, the years of being told I was too much, too intense, too obsessed with work, too difficult to love, Mail didn't offer sympathy or advice. He just looked at me with those dark, unreadable eyes and said, "He was afraid of you. Men like that always are." And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd buried forever. I felt seen. I told myself it was professional courtesy. Told myself he was being a gracious host. Told myself that whatever this was, it wasn't real, couldn't be real, because men like Mail didn't exist, and if they did, they certainly didn't want women like me. Broken women. Difficult women. Women who'd spent so long protecting themselves that they'd forgotten what it felt like to be held. But every night, when I closed my eyes in that beautiful, impossible room, I thought about the way he looked at me. And I knew, the way you know things you don't want to admit, that I was already in too deep to leave. 3 weeks into my stay, I tried to work. I opened my laptop in the library, pulled up my cloud storage, and found nothing. 8 months of research, recordings, photographs, interview transcripts, the location coordinates I'd nearly died for, gone. Not corrupted. Not accidentally deleted. Just absent, as if they'd never existed at all. I called my editor. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. On the 3rd try, she finally picked up. Lois. Her voice was strange. Distant. "I've been meaning to reach out. Listen, the serpent story. Management thinks maybe you should take some time. Step back. There's been some concern about accuracy." Accuracy. My hand tightened on the phone. I have sources. I have documentation. I have. Had. She corrected gently. You had documentation. IT says there's nothing in the system. And your sources.
She paused.
The ones we could reach say they never spoke to you. The room tilted. That's not possible. I know this is hard to hear. But maybe some time away from the story would be good. For your health. For your career. Another pause. Take care of yourself, Lois. She hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty screen, feeling the shape of something I couldn't name closing around me. I should have left. Should have driven back to Lexington, demanded meetings, fought for my story, done all the things a journalist does when powerful people try to bury the truth. Instead, I closed the laptop. And I stayed. That night, Mail found me on the terrace, watching fog roll across the hills like something breathing. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside me in the darkness, close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from him, because he was always cold, I'd noticed. Cold hands.
Cold skin.
Cold in ways that January couldn't explain. Your story, he said finally. It's been taken from you. You knew. I suspected. He turned to face me, and in the moonlight, his features looked carved from marble. Beautiful and terrible and utterly still. There are people in this state with enough power to make inconvenient things disappear. Evidence. Witnesses. Journalists who ask the wrong questions. Is that a warning? It's an observation. His hand rose, and his fingertips brushed my cheek, light, careful, cold as stone. You've spent your whole life fighting alone, haven't you? Building walls. Proving you don't need anyone. Making yourself so strong that no one could ever hurt you again. My throat closed. How do you? Because I see you, Lois. His thumb traced the line of my jaw. I see the woman who survived a marriage that tried to erase her. Who rebuilt herself from nothing. Who learned to trust only her own eyes, her own instincts, her own relentless need to uncover what's hidden. His voice dropped lower. I see how tired you are. How lonely. How much you want to stop fighting, just for one moment, and let someone else carry the weight. Tears burned behind my eyes. I didn't let them fall. You don't know me. I know you better than anyone ever has. He stepped closer, and I could smell him now. Something ancient, something like rain on old stone, something that made my blood sing with warning and want in equal measure. I know you're standing here in my house, miles from anyone who could help you, and you're not afraid of me. You're afraid of how much you want to stay. He was right. God help me, he was right. The first time he kissed me, I knew something was wrong. His mouth was cold. Not cool, not winter-chilled, cold in the way that deep water is cold. Cold in the way that absence is cold. And when I pressed my hand against his chest, searching for the heartbeat that should have been there, I found nothing. Silence. Stillness. A void where life should have lived. I should have pulled away. Should have demanded explanations. Should have run. Instead, I kissed him deeper. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about surviving the kind of marriage I survived. You don't come out stronger. You come out starving. Starving to be seen. Starving to be wanted. Starving for someone to look at you like you're the most important thing in the room, even when you know, especially when you know, that importance comes with teeth. Male kissed me like he was claiming something. Like I was a door he'd been waiting centuries to open. And I let him. I let him because I was so goddamn tired of being careful. Tired of protecting myself. Tired of the armor I'd built from all those years of betrayal and rebuilding. I wanted to feel dangerous. I wanted to want something that could destroy me. I wanted, just once, to choose the fire instead of running from it. When we finally pulled apart, his eyes had changed. Darker.
Deeper.
Something ancient moving behind them like shadows in deep water. You feel it, he said. Not a question. You know something is wrong with me. Yes. And you're still here. I touched his face, that cold, beautiful, impossible face, and felt my heart crack open along fault lines I'd thought were healed. I'm still here.
He smiled then.
Not the almost smile I'd grown used to. Something fuller. Something hungry. Something that should have terrified me. Good, he whispered. Because I've waited a very long time for you, Lois Daly. And I'm not letting you go. I told myself it was passion. Intensity. The natural consequence of two wounded people finding each other in the dark. I told myself a lot of things. None of them were true. I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in late February. The test sat on the bathroom counter, 2 lines bright and undeniable, and I stared at it for so long that the winter light shifted across the marble floor. 38 years old. A career in ruins. Living in a stranger's house in rural Kentucky. And now this. I should have felt panic. Should have felt the walls closing in. Should have calculated the logistics, insurance, doctors, what comes next, all the practical machinery that spins to life when a woman finds herself suddenly not alone in her own body. Instead, I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt held. Male found me in the bedroom an hour later, still sitting on the edge of the bed, still holding the test. He didn't ask what it was.
Didn't need to.
He took one look at my face, and something in his expression shifted, opened, like a lock finally turning. "I knew you would give me this," he said.
Not I'm happy.
Not "this is wonderful." Not any of the words a normal man would say. "I knew you would give me this." I should have asked what he meant. Should have demanded to know why he sounded so certain, so satisfied, so utterly unsurprised. Should have pressed him on the strangeness of those words. "Give me this," as if my body were a gift he'd been waiting to unwrap. But when he knelt before me and pressed his cold lips to my stomach, when he whispered something in a language I didn't recognize, when he looked up at me with those ancient eyes full of something that looked terrifyingly like devotion, I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. The estate changed after that. Or maybe I just started noticing what had always been there. The staff, those silent figures I'd glimpsed in hallways, always moving away, always just out of sight, began treating me differently. They bowed when I passed. Actual bows, like I was royalty, like I was something sacred. They set my place at the head of the table, opposite Male. They brought me food I hadn't ordered, elaborate dishes, rich and strange, things that tasted like nothing I could name but that my body craved with an intensity that frightened me. And they looked at me with something I could only describe as fear. Not fear of me. Fear for me. The way you look at someone walking toward a cliff edge in the dark. One morning, I found the housekeeper, an older woman named Vera, who'd been with the estate for decades, crying in the kitchen. She stopped the moment she saw me, wiped her face,
Curtsied.
"Forgive me, miss," she whispered. "It's just the last one. The one before you." She stopped herself, shook her head. "Forgive me. It's not my place." "The last what?" I asked. "What do you mean? The one before me?" But she was already gone, disappearing through a door I could have sworn hadn't been there a moment ago. I should have left. The gates were always open. My car sat in the garage, keys on the hook, tank full of gas. No one locked my doors. No one guarded the exits. I could have driven away any time I wanted. But every time I thought about leaving, really thought about it, picture myself turning the ignition, pulling onto the long drive, watching the estate shrink in my rearview mirror, something happened. A heaviness settled in my chest. A fog crept into my thoughts. My hands wouldn't reach for the keys. My legs wouldn't carry me to the garage. And somehow, without deciding anything at all, I'd find myself back in the library, or the bedroom, or the garden, telling myself that tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow I'd be stronger. Tomorrow I'd go. Tomorrow never came. My mother called less and less, then stopped entirely. I told myself she was busy. She'd always been busy, always distracted, always somewhere else even when she was standing right in front of me. My sister's texts dwindled from daily to weekly to nothing. Old friends stopped reaching out. My editor never called again. The world outside got quieter and quieter, like someone slowly turning down the volume on a radio until all I could hear was the estate, the staff, the wind in the hills, the sound of Male's voice in the darkness, telling me I was safe, telling me I was home, telling me I was exactly where I was meant to be. And I believed him. That's the part that haunts me now. Not that I was trapped, but that I didn't want to escape. Not that I was imprisoned, but that the prison felt like the first home I'd ever had. I'd spent 38 years fighting for independence, building walls, proving I didn't need anyone. And then Male came along and made captivity feel like belonging. He was so gentle with me during those months. So attentive. He brought me books I'd mentioned wanting to read. Remembered small things, the way I took my tea, the songs that made me cry, the stories from my childhood I'd told him only once. He listened when I talked about the baby, about my fears, about the mother I hoped I'd become. He made me feel like the center of his universe. And maybe I was, just not in the way I thought. At night, I'd lie in our bed, when had it become ours, and feel the baby move inside me. Feel Mail's cold hand pressed against my belly, always searching, always waiting. Feel the weight of something ancient and patient settling around us like snow. I told myself I was happy. I told myself this was love. I told myself that the woman I used to be, the journalist, the fighter, the one who saw through lies, was still in there somewhere, just resting, just healing, just waiting for the right moment to wake up. But she never did. And by the time I understood why, it was already far too late. She came into the world during a lunar eclipse. I'd read somewhere that eclipses were bad omens for births. Old superstition, the kind of thing I would have dismissed a year ago with a journalist's eye roll and a Google search for scientific explanations. But lying in that bedroom with contractions tearing through me, watching the moon turn red through the window, I didn't feel like a journalist anymore. I felt like a sacrifice. The staff gathered outside my door. I could hear them through the walls, through my own screaming, voices rising and falling in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. Not words. Older than words. Sounds that predated human speech, that came from a time when worship meant blood and devotion meant death. They were chanting for my daughter. Or maybe they were chanting for what my daughter would become. Mail stayed with me through all of it. Held my hand with those cold fingers. Whispered things in my ear that I couldn't quite hear, but that calmed me anyway, smoothed the edges of my panic, made the pain feel distant and manageable. His eyes never left my face. Not when I screamed. Not when I bled. Not when the midwife, a woman I'd never seen before, with white hair and eyes that reflected the red moon, pulled my daughter from my body and held her up like an offering. The chanting stopped. Silence. Perfect, absolute silence, like the whole world was holding its breath. And then my daughter cried, once, sharp and thin, and Mail took her from the midwife's hands with a tenderness that made me weep. I'd never seen him gentle before. Never seen anything soft in those ancient features. But watching him hold her, cradle her against his cold chest, look down at her face with something that looked almost like love, I wept. I wept because it was beautiful. Because he was beautiful. Because for one perfect moment, lying in blood-soaked sheets under a bleeding moon, I believed we were a family. Then I saw his eyes. The way they flickered. The way the pupils dilated, not with wonder but with something else, something older, something hungry. The way he looked at her not like a father looks at a daughter, but like a man looks at a door he's finally found the key to. The completion, he whispered. Not to me.
To her.
To whatever was listening in the darkness. At last. The completion. I named her Ivy. For life. For growth. For the way she'd already wound herself around my heart and squeezed. Mail didn't object to the name. He didn't use it either. To him, she was always the completion. Always something achieved rather than someone born. The first week, I told myself I was imagining things. Ivy didn't cry. Not really. Not the way babies are supposed to, that relentless, demanding wail that drags mothers from sleep at 2 and 4 and 6 in the morning. She made sounds occasionally, small mewling noises that seemed more like communication than distress, but she never truly cried. She didn't wake at night. Slept straight through. Every night, perfectly still in her crib. I'd creep in to check on her, terrified I'd find her not breathing, and she'd be lying there with her eyes open. Watching. waiting, staring at the corner of the ceiling like she could see something moving in the shadows. I told myself newborns couldn't focus their eyes. Told myself it was a trick of the light. Told myself a lot of things. The scratches started in the 3rd week. I woke up one morning with thin red lines running down my forearms, parallel, deliberate, too precise to be accidental. I didn't remember scratching myself.
Didn't remember dreaming.
But there they were, and there was blood under my fingernails, and when I looked in the mirror, my own face stared back at me like a stranger's. Then the notes. I found the first one on my nightstand. My handwriting, I knew my handwriting, but I didn't remember writing it. The words repeated across the page, over and over, pressing harder with each line until the pen had torn through the paper. The moon will turn. The blood moon comes. Give what was promised. I showed it to Mail. Watched his face for surprise, for concern, for any normal reaction. He smiled. You're remembering, he said. That's good. That's natural. Remembering what? But he just kissed my forehead, cold, so cold, and took the note from my hands. I found more after that. In drawers. Tucked into books. Folded in Ivy's crib, pressed against her sleeping body like love letters from a madwoman. Always the same words. Always my handwriting. Always no memory of putting pen to paper. The moon will turn. The blood moon comes. Give what was promised. I started staying awake at night, watching my own hands, waiting to catch myself in the act of writing, of scratching, of doing whatever terrible thing my body did while my mind was elsewhere. But I never caught anything. I just found myself in strange places, standing in the garden at 3 a.m., standing in the wine cellar with no memory of walking there, standing outside a door I'd never noticed before, my hand raised to knock on wood that felt warm beneath my fingers.
Something was happening to me.
Something was happening to my daughter. And Mail just watched it all with those ancient, patient eyes, waiting for whatever came next like a man who already knew the ending. I should have fought harder. Should have questioned more. Should have been the woman I used to be, the investigator, the skeptic, the one who never stopped digging until she found the truth. But motherhood had softened me. Love had blinded me. And by the time I started to see clearly again, the blood moon was already rising. I woke to silence. Not the comfortable silence of sleep, but the heavy, waiting silence of something about to happen. The kind that presses against your ears like deep water. The kind that means everyone else already knows what you're about to discover. The bed beside me was cold. Colder than usual, which should have been impossible because Mail was always cold. But this was different. This was the cold of absence. The cold of something that had never been human pretending it no longer needed to try. I reached for Ivy's crib before I was fully awake. Muscle memory. Mother's instinct. That primal need to touch your child, to confirm she's still breathing, still there, still yours. The crib was empty. I didn't scream.
Didn't cry.
Something had shifted in me during those months at the estate. Some survival mechanism clicking into place, telling me that panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. I got up, put on the robe hanging by the bed, walked to the door, and heard the chanting. It came from below, from beneath the house, beneath the foundations, beneath anything that should have existed under a tobacco estate in rural Kentucky. The same sounds I'd heard outside my birthing room. The same language that predated human speech. But louder now. Closer. Rising through the floorboards like heat from a fire. The mirror in the hallway was wrong. I noticed it the way you notice something in a dream. A detail that doesn't fit. That your brain tries to explain away but can't quite. The glass wasn't reflecting the hallway behind me. It was reflecting darkness. And in that darkness, I could see stairs. I pushed against the frame, and it swung open. The staircase spiraled down into living rock, not carved, not built, grown. The walls were wet with something that wasn't water. The air smelled like iron and old roses and the particular musk of places where terrible things have happened for a very long time. I followed the chanting, down and down, until the stairs opened into a chamber so vast I couldn't see the ceiling. Torches lined the walls, actual torches, flames dancing in air that shouldn't have had oxygen. And in the center, arranged in concentric rings like the petals of some terrible flower, knelt the cult I'd spent 8 months hunting. The stone circle. The same one I'd found in the woods that January night. But this wasn't a satellite. This wasn't an outpost. This was the heart. And at its center stood Male. He held Ivy against his chest, her small body wrapped in white cloth, her eyes open and watching me with an expression no infant should have. He wore robes now, black, ancient, embroidered with symbols that hurt to look at. And his eyes were no longer human. They glowed the color of old blood. The color of the moon through the chamber's impossible skylight. The color of everything I should have seen and refused to see for an entire year. Lois. His voice echoed through the chamber, layered with something deeper, something that made my bones vibrate. You came. I knew you would. You always do what you're meant to do. Give me my daughter. The words came out steadier than I felt. Old habit. Old armor. The journalist who'd faced down corrupt politicians and predatory CEOs, still believing that the right question could unlock any door. But there were no right questions here. Male smiled. That smile I'd fallen in love with. That smile I'd trusted. That smile that had made me feel, for the first time in my broken life, like someone finally understood me. You found us because we wanted to be found, Lois. He descended the altar steps, Ivy still cradled against him. Every clue you uncovered, every source who talked, every document that led you closer, we left them for you. Breadcrumbs for a hungry woman who'd been starving her whole life.
No.
You ran because we needed you running. Fear opens certain doors that desire cannot. And you, he stopped before me, close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from his skin. You ran beautifully, straight into my arms, exactly where you belonged. I don't. You loved me. His free hand rose to my face, traced my jaw, cupped my cheek with a tenderness that made me want to weep. You loved me because I am the shape of every wound you've ever carried. The absent father, the gaslighting husband, every man who made you feel invisible and then punished you for wanting to be seen. His thumb brushed my tears away. Wounds always recognize their maker, Lois. And I have been making women like you for a very, very long time. The cult's chanting rose. The moon bled red through the skylight. And I understood, finally, the full weight of what I'd done. I hadn't been investigating a story. The story had been hunting me. Every choice I'd made, every moment of independence, every wall I'd built, every time I'd told myself I was too smart to be fooled, had led me here. To this altar. To this man who wasn't a man. To a ritual that had been waiting for someone exactly like me since before I was born. The completion requires 3 things, Male said, his voice now fully inhuman, fully ancient, fully the deity I'd spent my career trying to expose. A mother who believes she cannot be deceived. A daughter born under a bleeding moon. And the willing surrender of both. I won't, I whispered. I'll never. You already have. He leaned close, pressed his cold lips to my forehead. Every night you stayed. Every morning you chose not to leave. Every time you looked at the warning signs and explained them away. You've been surrendering since the moment you got in my car. He was right. God help me, he was right. The ritual completed. The moon bled. And Lois Daly, journalist, mother, Woman who'd spent her whole life fighting to see the truth became what she was always meant to become. An offering.
A door.
A key that opens something ancient and hungry and eternal. If you're listening to this, I need you to understand something. The predators who take women like me, like us, they don't look like monsters. They look like finally being understood. They look like the answer to every prayer you've whispered in the dark when you thought no one was listening. They make you feel chosen in a world that's made you feel invisible. And by the time you see the altar, you're already lying on it. There are other stories like this. Other women who ran toward what they thought was safety. Other nights that changed everything. If this one found something inside you, something that recognized the shape of this kind of darkness, you might want to stay close. Stories like this don't always find you twice. And the women who need them, we recognize each other.